Well, it's great to see everyone here. My name is Phil Reddick, and on behalf of the Center for Executive Leadership, the second half committee of the Center for Executive Leadership, and YBL's second half, we're glad you're here. And it's just looking over this, as panelists, as hosts, it's just amazing that you're here. And it just reminds me of the need, just the questions people have, and it just validates what we're doing to have you here. So thank you for being here and being a part of this. And this will be recorded. Thankfully, it will be on the Center's YouTube. It'll be put up on YouTube on the Center's website, so you can later, people that couldn't come today will be able to participate in the panel as well. I'm going to start over here with Lauren. We're going to go down toward me.
Excuse me. My name is Muir, and I'm a retired banker, retired in July of 2020. A little bit about my story. I was married to 41 years, my wife Debbie. In 2012, she was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, and she passed away in December of 20 with complications related to that. And so certainly want to share a little bit about their journey. With that, we'll say this too, that God and His just wonderful blessings brought another woman into my life, and we've been married. Claire, she was out front here. Been married will be 3 months on Saturday. So God has really blessed me in that way. So just again, the part of the reason that the passion for this is I've seen so many other people go through this, and so many folks that helped me through this journey. And anything I can do to help others through it, I want to be able to do that. So it's a little bit of my story.
Thanks, Loring. My name is Robert Atherton. I have been married 28 years, have one daughter, one child who is married, and my wife is here as well, Lee. I don't know where you are sitting. There she is. I've been in the bank software business for about 15 years. Prior to that, I was a banker. But Lee and I were both involved in giving care for both of her parents and both of mine. My mom is still living. She's in memory care. But in walking through that over the last 5 years or so, people find out about that and they ask us about it, and we're happy to share what we learned through that time. It is a very hard time to do that, but there's some things that we learned through that. Hopefully we've been able to help some folks, and I talked to Phil about just being available if anybody in YBL or Center for Executive Leadership needed just somebody to talk to who had been there. Certainly happy to do that. So again, as Loring said, we just hope you all learned something today that might help you in the journey that you're on.
Good afternoon. I'm Christy Baynes, and I am with LifeCare for Seniors. Actually, we are rebranding to LifeCare Solutions because we're finding that we're working with families whose loved one is faced with complex care needs even as young as in their 20s. And so I have worked in the geriatric field for 24 years. I've worked in a variety of different communities, areas, from assisted living to in the hospital to home care. And the company that I have and have had for 10 years, which Bill actually helped me start 10 years ago, it provides complex care management for families. And we've expanded our services as the needs grow. But like we first introduced when we had a Zoom a few weeks ago, really, truly, we're on a journey, and that's what Loring and Robert both said, is, we're on a journey with them. And again, I've done this professionally for a long time, but until I sat in the shoes of doing this for a family member or family members, it's very different. It's very different. And I know a lot, but when I'm faced with it and I'm right there in front of it, I mess up terribly. And my beautiful 17-year-old daughter, when she was 12 years old, she looked at me and said, why do you not treat Papa like you treat your clients? She was talking about me with my dad. And so when somebody says, well, where would you put your mom? I'm like, well, I'm going to put my clients where I would put my mom. But then, of course, my daughter says, you need to treat your dad like you treat your clients. So it's a different story when you're walking the journey personally. And so I feel like that's actually given me more experience than everything I've done leading up to then. So I'm glad to be here, and this is such a great panel, so I appreciate it.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Bill Nolan. Oh, closer? Yeah. Closer. My name is Bill Nolan. I'm the lawyer on the panel. I've been a lawyer now, this is my 40th year. The firm I founded, I'm not the only lawyer anymore, but the firm's called the Alabama Elder Care Law Firm. And the name suggests exactly what we do. We don't do divorce. We don't do bankruptcy. We don't do criminal defense. We don't do personal injury or medical malpractice. We don't do immigration law or adoptions. We don't do real estate closings. All we do is help families understand how to protect and preserve their life savings. For seniors, that might be understanding how to pay for long-term care in a nursing home at $9,000 a month. Can I qualify for veterans benefits? Can I qualify for Medicaid? Do I want to qualify for Medicaid? And for younger families, it might be protecting their hard-earned assets and protecting their minor children. People just don't think about that, but minors are the most important reason younger families should have an estate plan. And then we help with probate after a family's lost a loved one, navigating that probate process so they don't spend their whole lives down in probate court. And that's what we do. So I'm here to answer any questions that you might have about any of those topics. Thank you.
And I'm on this panel because just the significant need that we have seen. My story is within 24 hours, 2 weeks ago, one of my good friends, a board member, lost his dad at 83 suddenly, and going through that grieving process. And then at lunch that day, I met with a guy whose mom was turning 94 that week and living with them. And we talked about issues there. And then the next morning, I met with a guy that, even before I went to breakfast with a guy that called me and said, how can I share Christ with my mother who is dying one last time? So this is something that's important to all of us. All of us may have been in the journey or going through the journey. And so this is why we're having this panel. So I'm going to jump in with both feet and say, if there was one thing that you wanted everybody here to know from your experience or your expertise, what would be that one thing you would want them to know?
Me first? Ooh, one thing. I suppose that knowing that other people have been through whatever you're facing already, whether they're professionals like Christy or other family members, people you go to church with, neighbors. You don't have to recreate the wheel. Ask for help, ask for advice, ask for references. There's somebody out there who can answer your exact question. You just have to be curious and persistent. And practicing elder law, what I do, there are lawyers who don't know what elder law attorneys do. So it's not uncommon for individuals not to know that we're out there. We can help you with all these issues. So be curious, be persistent. That's probably the most important advice I can give you.
That's great advice, Bill. I would say the gift of knowledge. So the knowledge would be to your loved one, to your family members, not just your spouse, to your adult children. If there are not adult children or you don't trust an adult child, then somebody that you would trust. Give the gift of knowledge. They need to know the information that will help you if you're in an emergency. We focus so much on the person that's been diagnosed with the illness, but the thing that I've learned from the very beginning of working in this industry is when we're working with a married couple, we consider both clients. And so we want to know about both, because the person with the illness is always going to make it to the doctor, is always going to have everything they need. It's the person that's providing that care. So the gift of knowledge, and we've got a wonderful checklist that you can put together. I mean, it's basic information, but don't be afraid to share it with the people. Like, if you've met with someone like Bill, and your daughter is your power of attorney, and she has no idea where the power of attorney is, she has no idea who your doctors are, knows no medications, knows nothing about it, what's going to happen when she's helping you in an emergency? So the gift of knowledge, I think, is huge, to go ahead and have those things prepared. And again, I'm happy to share a checklist. Y'all can get my email afterwards. We have just a real basic one that everybody can put together. So we do that with all of our folks as well.
Thanks, Christy. Mine is short and sweet, and it is make the best decision you can with the information you have at that time, and don't second guess yourself, because hindsight is 20/20, and you will drive yourself crazy. So we just had to do that. You know, we had so much information, and you get to a point where you have to make a decision, and then you got to move on.
I think, didn't Pat Dye say hindsight's 20/20, or 50/50, right? 50/50, right? I would. They've already emphasized a couple of things. I would emphasize is use resources, and honestly I did not do a very good job of using a lot of the resources that were available, and that's a regret, or I won't say regret, but certainly second guess. The other thing I would say, particularly if you end up being the caregiver, you will make mistakes. I made plenty of them. And my advice is just move forward, ask for forgiveness, and move forward. But try not to look back on those. And as Robert said, I did the best that I could with the information I had, but there certainly were plenty of mistakes. But anyway, I would just encourage you not to have regrets and do the best you can.
Great advice already. I'm going to ask each one a specific question that they will answer. And Robert, I'm going to start with you. Tell us about your experience in taking care of your parents and the necessary steps to adequately care for your parents. Tell us kind of that process.
Okay, this is a little hard, but it started in January of 2016. My wife's father was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And he passed away in March of 2017. Up until about December of 19, we were dealing with my dad, my mom, and my wife's mom. They all knew the Lord, so that was a blessing. They all had long-term care insurance, which was a blessing. My mom is still in memory care, and we've had certainly some challenges through that. But there was so much going on just from medical things and having to make decisions very quickly. We dealt with assisted living, independent living, skilled nursing, rehab, hospitals, at-home care, hospice, the whole thing. I mean, it was, you just wait for the next phone call. And it was a blessing to see our parents go through that. It was hard, but they all, in their own way, dealt with it like you would hope they would. So the other blessing in all of this is both families, my wife's family and my family, we all work together very well dealing with our parents. I mean, I even helped deal with my wife's parents. She's helped deal with my parents. So I know not every family has that, but that was a blessing for us and just how we grew together. So, I mean, it's a lot. I mean, we've had a tough 5 years. So, but it's, you know, at the end of the day, God's in control, and you have to remember that.
Sorry, we only have one mic, but it gives us a chance to catch our breath. Lauren, talk to us about caring for your spouse and what you learned through the process.
Well, as I mentioned, the diagnosis was in, I believe it's middle of 2012. We were living in Memphis at the time, and certainly is early onset, so for the first little while, you wouldn't know much. Certainly if you weren't around her all the time, you would not know any difference. So at that point, it was not very difficult. But certainly as the years passed, there were challenges that kept coming up, and several things I would mention as far as my experience, because it was my nature to want to go it alone, and that I can do this, and I found out very quickly that was not the case. I needed assistance. I needed folks coming alongside of me, encourage me. I see some of those folks here in the room that encouraged me during that journey. And one of the things they would ask me when I would meet with them, first thing they ask is, how's Debbie doing? And then they'd ask, how are you doing? And I think that's important. As somebody's already mentioned, it's important to care. As a caregiver, you make sure you take care of yourself, because if we're not able, whether health-wise or otherwise, then we can't be a caregiver for a person that, or our loved one. So I had to kind of make sure I did that, accept assistance. There would be people that would want to help with certain things, and you didn't want to bother people or things like that. But I learned very quickly there are folks that want to do that. That's how they want to encourage you and help you on your journey. And so allowing people to come in your life and help. Again, I talked about accepting assistance, and it's a long journey. It was a long journey for us. It's about a 7-year journey, and it was difficult in many ways. We tried to keep things as normal as we possibly could, going to church, going to our favorite places to eat, and making it as normal as possible for our entire family. And it's easy to isolate in that situation too, to not want to get out, not want to be with others, but we made a concerted effort to not do that. And I think that helped us as we both went through the journey. So that's just some thoughts on my particular journey.
Okay, the next question is for Christy, and on our Zoom call, she talked about some of the things that led you to do what you're doing, and your history and that kind of thing. So I would love them to hear your motivation and how your journey and how you're doing what you're doing.
Well, if I'm being honest, it began because my major was psychology, and I thought I needed to go work for psychologists before I went into a PhD. And at the time, I was going to go into industrial organizational psychology. That is so far from what I do, and that would not have been my passion. But I was sharing, I believe it was Tim earlier, that on one of those little job boards, I pull a cord or pull a piece of paper, and it's a job board for the Department of Gerontology and Geriatric Medicine. And so at the time, all of my grandparents were living. I was the oldest grandchild, and just loved all of the wisdom that my grandparents gave me. And so for the first half of my career in geriatrics, my passion was trying to fake it until I make it, and pretend like I knew what I was doing. And I would say my passion was for my grandparents, and it truly was. But then in 2008, I was... See, Robert, you're going to the whole tears are going to happen again now. I know, right? I was pregnant with my son, and my father started really acting strange. Sorry. long story longer, he's still here, wonderful. Matter of fact, he heard me on Talk of Alabama, and he called my husband and said, I think she was talking about me. But anyway, he has had a very long journey, probably has the largest medical record. He competes with any client that I work with. He's had a history of mental illness. He's had a history of heart issues, vascular dementia. Because of the heart issues, now we're going to throw in some rare gallbladder cancer. I'm like, Dad, if you're going to get something, you're just going to really go in and get it, aren't you? You know? And so I think I know the passion of walking the journey for the last 12 years, no, more than that, however long, 14 years with my dad, and being there for my mother and trying to explain everything to my brother, and then being the daughter. Like I said, giving the gift of knowledge is so important, because when you're in the middle of the crisis or you're having to react to some of these situations, when it's your family member, you have all that history. When I do this professionally, I don't have that history, so I can come in from a very unbiased view, and it makes me have a clear head. You guys are not going to have a clear head. I don't have a clear head when I'm working with my dad and my mom, you know, and then also my aunt and my uncle's journey through terminal cancer. And so it was going through the walk with them that really has been my major motivation. And, you know, I have 2 children and both in-law. You know, I've got my in-laws, and my dad is still around. He's got 9 lives. We're on 8 3/4, and we laugh about it. So anyway, that would be my main motivation.
Thank you, Christy. Okay, Bill, we need some legal advice. What are some areas that people might overlook, or things that you just deal with? I know even before you were on the Zoom call, you were in the hospital with someone and end-of-life issues that you were helping him deal with. So give us some legal expertise, if you don't mind.
Sure. If you think about things in terms of a Venn diagram, imagine 3 circles, interlocking circles. One of those circles is personal and medical. This has to do with an individual's needs. The other circle would be their financial needs, and the third would be their legal needs. When a person is diagnosed with almost any serious illness, our focus tends to be on their medical needs, on their personal needs. And we oftentimes exclude or push to the back the financial and legal needs until, well, when the time's right or when we have time to deal with it. I know some of you are in the financial sector. Andy Martin, for example, I ran into him before we began. The financial sector can only do so much. And if you don't take the steps to give somebody else the authority to manage your assets for you, well, your financial advisor's hands are tied. Another example would be if you don't have a will, your children from out of state can't serve as the administrator of your estate. If you have a power of attorney, and most people would look at a power of attorney and it says right there at the top, power of attorney, it's got to be good. Well, here in Alabama, a power of attorney has to have certain magic language in order for you to open and manage a trust to qualify for Medicaid. 90% of those powers of attorney we see out there don't have that clause, but nobody would know that. So I guess the advice would be, whether you're dealing with the medical needs now and you're up to here with helping your mom or dad with those medical needs, please don't disregard the financial and the legal needs, because your window of opportunity to deal with those is closing fast, and one day might be too late, and then you're stuck with what you have to deal with.
Wonderful. Thank each of you. Here's a question. You can take it any way you want, and Christy, I'll start with you. But how have you personally grown through the dealings that you've had with your family or for clients, and or what are you thankful for, or what would you wish you had done better? So you can take any of those or all of those, whatever you choose.
Am I starting first? Oh, I get to go. All right. I know, no tears, Robert. Truly, I feel like I learn the most through our clients, the families that we work with, and I have an incredible team. I did this for a while by myself, as Bill knows, and then in 2016 brought on my first employee that was a nurse that I'd known for a long time, and then since we've got 14 on staff now, and there are 8 of us that are care managers. And truly learning from our families and the situations that they're going through. We may not know the answer at the time, but that's how we learn it. Because they're going through something and we may know enough, but then there's a curveball that is thrown, and we want to be there for you through that journey. I mean, just like I've had to learn it with all of the different things that have happened with my family. You know, I didn't know some of those things until I was in the middle of it. And it truly is just this, you know, that corn maze, you know, the thing that you see on the movies where people are lost. That is where everybody is, particularly when you're working with somebody that's your loved one that's been faced with a complex illness or care needs. And we talk about this all the time in presenting to folks about long-term care. Here's the thing, nobody talks to each other. People feel like the doctors talk to one another, or that the doctors talk to the assisted living, and that the home care talks to the assisted living. Guess what? They don't. So it's up to you have to do it yourself or have an advocate do it for you. And so I think that that's truly what I've learned, and just through my personal growth God has blessed me with an incredible team. We have wonderful resources, and then just truly the people that I've worked with have taught me the most.
Oh, looks like it's mine, just like that. Yesterday, I met with a 93-year-old man who had just lost his wife a month before, and he sat there and he told me his story. He said, I was married for 64 years. He said, our very first date, we took the streetcar from Pratt City downtown, and we ate at John's Restaurant, which was high class in those days. And then we walked over to the Alabama Theater and saw a movie. And he didn't even remember the movie, but he remembered that first date. And as she was dying last year, he asked her if she would want to go to the Alabama Theater and see a movie. And they went down to the Alabama Theater at one of their last times out of the house. I met with a man a couple of years ago, and I said, I see you're a veteran. What'd you do? He said, I was in World War II. And I said, well, where? He said, well, I was at the at Battle of D-Day, Omaha Beach. And he just said it like, you might say, yeah, I was down at Publix. I mean, like, 80, 90% of the people at that invasion died. And he's one of the few people who walked away unscathed. I guess what I learned is that everybody has a story. And I don't work by the hour, so I'm not trying to make the meetings go any longer than they have to. But it's interesting to hear these stories, these older folks who have had a life, and maybe nobody else is listening to them. So to be there, to be present, and to listen is, I think, what I've picked up over the years.
As followers of Christ, we always try to be His image, and especially in dealing with a lot of the workers that are taking care of your loved ones. I mean, they see some terrible things and have to do some hard stuff. And we just tried our best to always encourage them, thank them, and just kind of be a light. And they, we've had a couple of situations where we got some feedback that, they've never seen a family respond to this like, ours has. And we just, all the glory goes to God for that, because in our own strength, these frustrations that Christy talked about, they'll drive you nuts. I mean, absolutely nuts. And I mean, down from, I remember there was a couple of times where you would, like, my mom had hip replacement surgery. And so the hospital had to transfer from there to the rehab place, and so they had to do it by ambulance. Well, you're waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, and pretty soon it's dinner time, and Mom hadn't had anything to eat all day, and nobody is like, "Hey, does your mom need something to eat?" I mean, you've got to be proactive, but you've got to do it without that frustration. But I would just say, as much as possible, just be that light of Christ to people that are dealing with your loved ones, because it's a tough job. It's a tough job.
Yeah, it's same with us. When the diagnosis came with Debbie, there was a tremendous amount of grieving at the diagnosis, probably as much or more even when her homegoing as a family, because we knew the result. We knew what was going to happen, didn't know when, but we trusted the Lord. And I know even as Debbie acknowledged it, and together, we asked questions. Why? She asked that question several times, and that's a hard question to answer. But our answer was, we knew that God was in control. He was a sovereign God. We didn't know why or how this journey would go, but we were going to walk that journey, and whatever God had in store for us, we were going to be accepting of that. And it really allowed us to grow together in our love for each other and our love for the Lord through that process. One of the things, though, that I share with people, it gave us an opportunity to see the good in others. And it was so neat to see how God worked through other people in our lives in ways that we could have never even imagined. I can just think of examples of when we would travel. And it got to a point where I'd have to be, stopping somewhere to go to the restroom. And if it was a place where maybe I couldn't go in, but she would go in, but it would be amazing to me that people would come alongside of her and recognize what was going on and helped her. And it was just amazing to see how God worked in a number of situations. I could name many, many more like that. But as far as things to do better, I think I mentioned one earlier, is to make better use of resources that are available. There are a lot of those out there that I found out since that I should have used, and wish I'd done more of that. The second thing, and I think I alluded to this earlier too, but I should have earlier gotten someone to come in to assist me. Again, I thought I could do it a lot on my own, and then I got very weary. I think we talked about that. And then probably I did do it at a certain point. I probably should have done it 6 months sooner than that. But it was a tremendous help to at least a couple of days a week, a couple of afternoons a week, someone to come in, give me a break. And that certainly helped me make it through that final part of their journey. But I wish I'd have done that a lot sooner.
Well, you've had a lot of information, and we're very timely in what we're doing here today. So let me open it up for questions from you, things that you might specifically want to ask one of the members of the panel, or maybe more than one can answer it. So any questions from the audience? So the question is there a place where you can find a lot of these answers compiled in terms of as an advocate? And everybody does need an advocate. And I could ask the panel, but I think I know the answer. How soon do we need to be prepared for these things? Today or yesterday, that's right. But Christy, who want to answer?
Well, I guess that's kind of our role. Again, I think obviously we would love to help you and things like that, but there are definitely, if you, even just learning tips and tricks on how to communicate with the doctors, what to ask. Again, the main thing is there are advocates out there. I mean, that is what we do, but I'm not trying to, get everybody to sign up or whatever. But the main thing is just again, that gift of knowledge. You've got to have that information, and you've got to ask questions. And again, they're not going to talk. I mean, doctors don't necessarily talk to one another. You'll be so surprised how I've got my primary care physician in this center, in this medical center, and then I've got my neurologist over here, and my cardiologist is over there, and my cardiologist prescribes something over here, but my neurologist, they don't know. So you've got to have that information with you. Just take it with you, ask questions, record your visit with the doctor. Ask them to write down questions. We had a lady recently whose husband had very, very late stage in Parkinson's disease, and it was very difficult for her. And I said, when the nurse comes in, write your questions out first, and if you can't follow what they're saying because you are in such a grief stage, have them write it down for you so that you understand better. And if they won't take the time to do it, then go find somebody else. And sometimes you may have an incredible specialist that's a physician, but they may have a terrible bedside manner, but they'll typically have a good nurse practitioner or a good, physician assistant that you could talk with. So it's very important here. That's also a good point, that a lot of these specialists do have nurse practitioners, and sometimes families will go, well, I want to see the doctor. I'm going to be honest, those nurse practitioners are actually trained better and have more knowledge for the families than the doctors do. And the doctors will tell you that. A lot of those specialist doctors are there to do the diagnosis. The follow-up and where you really need the hand-holding is going to be from those practitioners. So, again, knowledge is key, and being able to ask questions. And if something doesn't look right, if you know enough about your loved one's illnesses, for instance, my dad was in Tuscaloosa, and there's a reason that we don't go to the Don't Come Here hospital. Sorry if anybody's associated over there. But he was very ill with some crazy parasite in 2019, and he has a lot of medications he has to take for his mental illness. They were not running basic labs on him, and I was out of town. So when I got back in town and could get to Tuscaloosa with my mom, they were wanting to run all of these medical tests, CTs and scopes and all these things. And I'm like, have you run the basic panel to look at his labs? Have you run his lithium levels? They had not contacted his psychiatrist. They had not done any of these levels, and they basically made him toxic. And I had to have him airlifted from DCH to UAB. And their UAB just gave basic care, and that's all he needed at the time. He needed somebody just to look at these things, and that's where understanding the information that you have to do to manage those chronic illnesses so that you can become your own advocate is really important.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, the two questions are, the chicken question is, for Bill, what are some of the 2 or 3 things that everybody in this room needs to know, correct? And then the beef question was for Robert to share some scriptures that encouraged him or that you claimed during the process of dealing with your parents.
I want to ask the question, how many of you in this room have wills? I wouldn't want to embarrass anyone. I've spoken to groups like this, and maybe half the people have wills. Maybe they don't. But a will is certainly the most important single document you can have at your death. Now, the most important document you can have, period, would be a power of attorney. And everyone should have a power of attorney. And that allows someone else to manage your financial affairs if you're in the hospital, rehab, nursing home, or at home and can't speak for yourself or can't manage your affairs yourself. It's a very important document, and you'll hear people who say, oh, I'll get one when I need one. Well, I wish I had that luxury of knowing when an emergency was going to take place. Not everybody's that lucky. A power of attorney can sit there idle until it's needed, and if you don't have a power of attorney, no problem. the court will go through a process called a guardianship conservatorship, which costs thousands of dollars, takes a month or two. You have to be bonded, and you have to answer to the court every year while that guardianship conservatorship's in place. Or you can have a power of attorney for $200 or $300 and avoid that mess. You mentioned a question was about health care. We also prepare all the health care related documents that a person needs, including a HIPAA waiver and a final disposition, and we give copies of that to each client and say, take this to your doctor and have it scanned into your chart immediately. It becomes a part of your chart, like your recent x-rays and blood work, and it follows you wherever that chart goes. We've seen a lot of healthcare directives that have children's names, adult children's names, named as what's called a proxy, but there's no phone number, there's no address, there's really no way for the hospital to contact them. So following up on little details like that, helping people clean up the mess is I guess, the most important fundamental step we'd go through.
I'd say probably the scripture that we leaned on a lot was just honor your mother and father. This is funny, actually. Lee and I both grew up in Huntsville, and our parents were members of a Baptist church. And my dad taught Sunday school, and in the midst of his illness, one of the things that started happening is that he started using profanity. And I mean, we would have to turn our head and put our hand over our mouth to keep from laughing, because it just, you could tell he was so frustrated. But for those words to come out of his mouth at that time, it was like, ugh, wow, this is tough. But I'd say just honoring your parents or your loved one, if it's your spouse. But just to echo what Christy said, be truthful with your children about what's going on with you. Don't hide things from them thinking that you're protecting them in some way, because you're not. You don't have to tell them how much money you have in the bank account, but just be truthful about medical things and financial things, and make sure they know where the file is. I told y'all we had one daughter. Lee and I are both oldest, and both of our dads were engineers. So our daughter didn't have a prayer. But our dads were very organized, and my dad had a folder, and I knew where the folder was, and I knew what was in the folder, and I knew what I was supposed to do, and they had everything lined up. And so it made it easy for me as the executor to kind of step in when I needed to sell the house and do all those things that you have to do. The other thing I would encourage you to do is when you have your will, your DNR, your living will, your power of attorney, all of that, have it in a place where whoever's going to be taking care of you knows where it is. Because we found that for us, if I had that quick file that I could grab when you get the phone call, and you can fax something or whatever the hospital or rehab place or whatever they needed, not to have to go around and try to find it. You had it right there ready to go. So I would say those would be some things that I would suggest. In going through this, we have updated all of that for us. It's not a good conversation to have. My daughter doesn't like to talk about it, but she knows where the file is. Our executor knows where the file is. We've even written down passwords for everything. Banking accounts, how to get into the insurance, usernames, passwords, everything. We've written all that down. Phone numbers, it's all in one spot. So the best you can, kind of start walking through that with your spouse or your family, just so that they know where that information is.
The question is there a way to find out the costs that you would have to cover that are not covered by insurance? Is that correct?
Clients spend about $30,000 a month right now. You got to just, when you're dealing with long-term care, basically insurance is not covering it unless somebody has long-term care insurance, and even then it may not cover everything. And you're going to have gaps in that as well. So think of it this way. If you're in the hospital, covered by your insurance, right, instead of co-pays. Prescriptions, covered by your insurance until you fall into the donut hole and blah, blah, blah. Going to the doctor, covered by your insurance unless there's co-pays. Rehab, covered up to a point unless you have some tricky Medicare Advantage plan and they don't want to play nice with everybody. But for the most part, you know, care that's being delivered by caregivers or in a community, whether it's independent living, assisted living, memory care, nursing home, that is out of your pocket. Now, there are things, and Bill, you can go on to VA, Medicaid.
Right. These days around Birmingham, it's $20 to $25 an hour for a caregiver to come into your home to take care of your loved one. And that adds up. I mean, people say, I'm going to keep mom at home for as long as possible. It might cost 3 or 4 times what a good nursing home might cost you to stay at home. Nursing homes are $9,000, $10,000 a month, and that's private pay till your money runs out. Then you can apply for Medicaid. If you're a veteran, great, fantastic. The VA nursing home in Pell City is the nicest nursing home in the state. It's also an assisted living. There's a long waiting list, and it's only available to, really, for all practical purposes, wartime era veterans because of the wait. And it's not available to a spouse. So it comes with its own set of limitations. Otherwise, Fairhaven, South Haven, St. Martin's in the Pines, Kirkwood at the River, you're looking at $10,000 a month, you know, and it goes up every year.
I'll just echo that. My mom is in skilled nursing. My mom's in memory care, and it's about $5,700 a month. Of course, that covers everything. I mean, that's food and all that. If she was at home, we'd still be having to pay utilities. We'd still be having to buy food. You've got somebody in your house all the time. We had to hire 24/7 care when she got out of the rehab. And they came to the facility and sat with her, and it was 24/7, and 1 month of that was $16,000. And that was all out of pocket because the long-term care policy was paying for her memory care room. My parents were both in assisted living for about 3 months, and then my dad got moved to skilled nursing. Again, this was it 2019, honey? Yeah, 2019, 9 months, January to September of 2019, and it was $9,800 a month, and long-term care paid for about $6,600 of that. So the balance, we had to come out of pocket. So 3 months of assisted living and 9 months of skilled nursing, I calculated that the long-term care company paid out 10 times what my dad paid into the policy. And that was just 9 months. So if you don't have it, if you can get it, it was a lifesaver for us. Lee's mom was in memory care for a while. The price was about the same. She got to where she couldn't stay there anymore, and we put her in a private care facility. It was run by a lady. She had probably 7 residents, maybe something like that, and she just did all the care in her home, but she didn't accept long-term care. You had to pay out of pocket, and it was about the same as what memory care would have been, but that covered food and everything. So again, as Bill said, we want to keep mom at home. Okay, well, that's great, but you know, you got some other expenses besides just the caregiver that you're going to have to contend with. So we did all of it, and for the situations that we were in at the time, that was the best option, and it worked great. We got blessed with some unbelievable caregivers for her parents. I mean, just we hit it out of the park with them. But again, God was in control of that. So, but that. Any other questions about just that part of it? Okay.
Well, first of all, let's thank our panel for just amazing. Just a few comments as we close. As believers, and I think most people in here that I see have a relationship with Christ, walk with Christ, we fail in many areas. But I think some of our best times are when people are hurting, that we rise to the occasion to really help people, to be merciful, to come alongside. And so, just as the panelists said, as you're in this stage or moving toward this stage, let the body of Christ minister to you. We want to do that. We may not be able to do everything, but we want to do that. And if you don't have that relationship with Christ, talk to one of us, but we want to come alongside of you. That's why we have this panel. This is why we have this seminar, so that we can. The other thing I would say, I believe, all of us go through stages of life. And as believers, we want to please the Lord. And the stage you may be in is caregiving. And you're pleasing the Lord by doing that, if that's what He's called you to do. I had the opportunity at the Presidential Prayer Breakfast to hear Mother Teresa speak there. And who would have thought that's all she did was care for people? And there she was in front of the 3,000 plus people at the Hilton talking about what she did and how she served Christ. So what we'd like for you to do, again, you have comment cards on the table, just index cards. If you want some information about anything we talked about, Christy has some information about what they do. We would love to help if you want to be in a small group, if you want just to talk to someone, whatever it is. And if you can't find a card, we ran out, write it on the back of some cards I have on the table and my business card, just so that we know, so that we can try to help you in this process. Because it's tough, but it's what God's called us to do at different stages of life. So I really appreciate you being here. Just want you to know that we have counselors at the center that you can use as well. And YBL Second Half has things, and we have Bible studies, so there's things you can be a part of there. There is an opportunity to serve. We serve Grace Klein at least once a quarter. They're feeding 19,000 people a week for Birmingham. And so we go over there and fill boxes and unload trucks and that kind of thing. Our next one is November 17th from 11 to 4. And if you can give an hour, give 2 hours, or whatever, we'll put you to work. We'll do some great things there. So let me close this again. Christy has a pretty hard deadline at 12:30. So if you want to speak to her quickly before she walks out of the door. And again, thank you so much for being here, every one of you. Father, thank you for our time together. Thank you for the opportunity to learn from each other, learn from our experiences, learn from our what the world would say tragedies, but you turn them into flowers. And so, Lord, we trust you through it. And again, thank you for the meal, the people, and opportunity to be together. In Jesus' name, amen. You're dismissed.